Hello and welcome to The Hindu. I'm Priyali Prakash and you're watching Tipping Point, our weekly show where we dive into climate change events and the trends shaping our future. Today, we'll talk about the implications of the failure of the Global Plastics Treaty on Climate Change, Storm Bora in Greece, and the Football Without the Footprint initiative. The fifth Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution, also called the Global Plastics Treaty or INC 5, failed to reach a consensus despite its week long meetings in Busan, South Korea, that concluded on December 1st. Around 170 countries were present at the convention, and yet no decision on how to control plastic pollution, which is one of the most pressing needs of the time, could be reached. Let's take a quick look at the background of these meetings. In 2022, the United Nations Environment Assembly had said that it is time to end plastic pollution. To achieve this goal, the INCs were set up and their task was to negotiate an international, legally binding treaty by the end of 2024. Countries have held 5 meetings to work towards this goal, first in Uruguay, followed by France, Kenya, Canada, before finally meeting in South Korea. The most significant learning from these meetings was that countries, especially states that invest heavily in petrochemicals, are unwilling to limit plastic pollution. At INC 5, India also said that it would be unable to support regulation of plastic production because that can challenge the right to development of the member states. This has a direct impact on climate because plastics are primarily derived from fossil fuels. Almost all steps in plastic production, like manufacture, extraction, refining, generate greenhouse gas emissions, which we know accelerate global warming. Without a legally binding treaty to limit plastic production, there is little hope that the sector's contribution to climate crisis can be controlled. End-of-life emissions generated by plastics are also significant. The world currently produces around 400 million tons of plastic waste every year, and this is estimated to reach around 1100 million tons by 2050. A large chunk of this plastic waste, especially that is used in packaging like single-use plastic for food and beverage containers, ends up in landfills. Disintegration of plastics in landfills, and also through open burning, can release harmful gases like methane into the atmosphere, which we know is a greenhouse gas. People living in Delhi, you might have noticed that your eyes burn or your throat gets scratchy when you are in the vicinity of one of the many landfills in the city, like the one in Ghazipur. It could possibly be because of the emissions from these landfills. The Hindu's deputy science editor Jacob Koshi was in South Korea at INC 5 conference. Here's what he said.
Now, however, countries that are heavily dependent on petrochemicals or are petrol and oil suppliers, they see this as, if at all you agree to cutting up this upstream production, as they call it, this would mean a kind of significant impairing of their economies. Because as we know, in India or many of these countries, petrochemical refining is a huge business. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Haldia, Kolkata. There's a huge refining complexes, and some of our biggest industries are like the Reliance Group, etc. They are major uh, producers of virgin plastics and polymers, which is then used into a wide variety of goods. So that's why India and many of these countries are slightly more on the defensive. India less so, because India is not really a major oil producer. But
Yes,
countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, they are far more vocal. But India is seen as somebody who is trying to come up with terms that seek to essentially retard, major ambition
right,
on this.
right.
But India has said that India is very cognizant of the fact that we need to rein in plastic pollution. We should rein in plastic waste. India actually is more optimistic about uh, uh, ha- uh, getting better systems, in fact getting finance to actually be able to collect waste plastic better, improve those systems. India is saying we are properly fine with many of those things, but it's this production and it being so vital to national development interests, as India puts it, is why there is hesitation on some of these aspects.
Not coming up with stricter guidelines to limit plastic production, in a way, also keeps the fossil fuel industry going. This delays the phasing out of fossil fuels, which is crucial if we want to keep the earth habitable for a long time. Plastics also compensate the ability of natural carbon sinks like forests and oceans to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Plastic waste can also disproportionately impact vulnerable communities that do not have easy access to waste management and disposal facilities. The extreme weather event of note this week is yet another storm in a country in the Mediterranean region. Storm Bora lashed parts of Greece in early December, bringing torrential rain, flash floods, and high-speed winds to the country, especially the islands of Rhodes and Lemnos. 3 people were reported killed because of the impact of the storm. Many areas suffered power outages, schools were closed, buildings were flooded, and cars were seen piled up on the roads as the water receded. We have previously reported on how an intense heat wave in the Mediterranean Sea this year led to stronger storms in the areas close to it. You can check out our previous episodes to know more about it. There seems to be no respite from the climate crisis, and scientists have made yet another worrying observation to second this. Although there are still a couple of weeks left for 2024 to end, the year is all set to be the hottest on record. Scientists have studied the data from European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service from January to November and have said that this will be the first time when global average temperature would exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the benchmark that we shouldn't have preferably crossed to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. We will know the exact details of how hot 2024 was once the data from December is available. For our Climate Hope this week, we are bringing to you the Football Without the Footprint initiative by the Los Angeles Rams, a prominent team in the US National Football League (NFL). While there is much debate about how carbon offsets operate, COP29 was able to come up with guidelines on the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, so there is hope that such emission reduction projects may work. Under the Football Without the Footprint initiative, LA Rams will purchase locally sourced carbon credits from CRC's Carbon Terra Vault. Terra Vault includes companies' carbon capture and storage projects, which are currently in the approval stage. The Rams also plan to undertake community outreach programs to inform people about carbon management. Thank you for watching this episode of Tipping Point. If you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to subscribe to The Hindu for more updates and in-depth climate coverage.